What's up guys, it's me, Jeremy. The Mage update is finally out on the PBE, and I'm getting a chance to mess around with each and every one of them and bringing you my thoughts on the more interesting reworks one at a time. In this video, we're taking a look at the new Malzahar. He's probably the champion who's going to have his overall playstyle of gameplay affected the most, and he's receiving quite a lot of changes, arguably more than any other mage champion in this spree of reworks coming out. He's been developed into quite the peculiar character and has a lot of new strengths but also a lot of new weaknesses. But I'm mostly wondering, how good is reworked Malzahar? Let's get started. So unlike with Vladimir, who we took a look at yesterday, this new Malzahar doesn't really play that similarly to the old Malzahar before the rework. A big part of what Riot wanted to accomplish with this rework was to change his playstyle, as the old Malzahar playstyle was generally flawed in terms of design. And as a result, Malzahar was always kind of in this weird spot and suffered from some unhealthy gameplay and mechanics. It's an interesting direction that's being taken with this kit, and I view it as by far the most risky rework that is taking place. Most, in fact, I would say probably all of the other reworks are keeping the general gameplay style of the champion intact, but Malzahar does play a lot differently now, and it's a bold direction that does have a lot of potential, but it's also one that I'm not entirely confident will work out. So first off, his abilities. We have his passive, which has been changed to a new ability completely. It's now this shield-esque kind of thing, where if Malzahar hasn't taken damage or been crowd controlled in the last 20 seconds or so, he gains this thing that gives him 90% damage reduction and crowd control immunity that affects anything from champions, and it lasts for 1 full second on top of it after the first ability is mitigated. This is definitely one of his new strengths. This passive is an incredible tool that you can use to really just wreck people, and since it lasts for 1 second after being initially hit, on top of affecting the first ability hit by, it's underestimated by a lot of people. It's a super powerful tool that requires your opponents to really have to take a suboptimal route of action to play around it, and a lot of the time, you can absorb a key ability, get some easy trades, maybe some free harass, or completely come out ahead in a 1v1 fight. His Q's been mostly unchanged, with the only difference being that it now does a little bit less base damage and has a smaller AP ratio. It also silences for a shorter duration, but it does cost less mana and has a shorter cooldown, but other than that, it's completely the same. And his W is the big thing that's changing everything revolving around Malzahar. It's a completely new ability kind of based off of his old passive. It now spawns a Voidling on a target position. Voidlings scale with both attack damage and ability power. And on the first time a Voidling attacks a champion, large monster, epic monster, or assists in killing a unit, it spawns another Voidling with the same remaining duration. But Voidlings will not spawn more Voidlings when there is less than 4 seconds left in their duration. As well, once you spawn 3 Voidlings, all of your Voidlings gain 100% attack speed. They also deal triple damage to lane minions under 25% HP, so they're great for last hitting, and they prioritize attacking targets that are affected by Malefic Visions, his E, or Nether Grasp, his ultimate. And they have 100% increased movement speed when seeking out one of those 2 types of targets. This is a pretty complex ability, as I'm sure you can tell, as the Voidlings have a lot of mechanics on them, but this W is his new bread and his new butter. It's the new defining feature of what makes Malzahar Malzahar. His Voidlings do mixed damage, and you can often spawn out a ton at a time and just shred through people. And they proc spell effects like Rylai's, but they do not proc on-hit effects like Lifesteal or Blade of the Rune King, for example. And although they scale with both ability power and attack damage and deal mixed damage, the attack damage scaling of the Voidlings is far superior to the ability power scaling. It's literally about twice as much, so there's loads of potential for AD Malzahar there. His E is mostly unchanged, with the only difference being that the base damage and the AP ratio has been lowered and the mana cost has been reduced. And the mana refund portion of the ability was changed to 2% of your maximum mana instead of a flat amount. As well, if you now land your Q or your ultimate on a target that is affected by his E, Malefic Visions, it now refreshes the duration. So you can kind of surprise people with that by extending the duration of his E to be super long. His ultimate has received what might seem like a minor change, but the impact it has on creating his new playstyle is almost as much as his W actually. His ultimate has had the flat damage on it completely removed, and it now creates a zone on the ground that deals % max health damage to opponents standing in it. The percent max health damage is 6, 8, or 10% depending on the level of the ultimate, and it gains 1 extra percent per 100 AP. So essentially his ultimate does only a small fraction of the damage that it used to. Because of this, Malzahar's Burst Mage or Burst Assassin type of style has been thrown pretty much completely out the window, and since his Q and E also receive damage nerfs, he is without a doubt doing a lot less damage now at will, and he can't exactly one-shot people like before. Instead, the new Malzahar has shifted to playing entirely with his W. You can still kind of one-shot people, but only if you set the W up perfectly by spawning multiple Voidlings on someone, and then also refreshing the duration of Malefic Visions on them. His one-shot isn't completely gone, but it has become a lot more of just a gameplay fantasy because the setup required to pull it off is just a little ridiculous, which is fully intentional, and it's the way Riot wanted his rework to be. Instead, he plays a lot more like a sustained damage bruiser now, or maybe like almost a disruptor. As a result, he can probably find success in the top lane on top of the mid lane, and especially in the jungle for sure. I wouldn't be surprised if top or jungle becomes Malzahar's best role after this rework. Because Malzahar revolves around his W now, his attack damage playstyle actually has incredible potential. Players will now have the decision to go a more utility-focused AP build with Rylai's to get the slow, or other AP items like Zonias and stuff that give a lot of really awesome utility, or you could go for an attack damage bruiser build with stuff like Death's Dance, Mauve Malmortius, Steric's Gauge, etc. Because the attack damage scaling of his Voidlings is pretty much double of what the AP scaling is, and all of his other abilities have taken nerfs to the AP ratios, I do believe that the attack damage bruiser style of Malzahar is actually going to become his meta build. Although the AP build is awesome because Rylai's is just so amazing for being able to have your Voidlings stick on a target, you just do so much more damage when building AD, it's insane. And he can totally shred through tanks like mad and just play with the AD carry and melt a tank instantly. As well, regardless of his playstyle, his ultimate will always be a solid tool to pick off targets when you have an ally. It's a point and click suppress that still lasts for a long time, and it's still a great tool, it's just not something that you can use for the damage now. And because his attack damage bruiser style is really strong, as a result Malzahar jungle and Malzahar top are actually going to be really good the more I think about it. He excels versus immobile champions that are short ranged or maybe melee, and in the mid lane a lot of high range poke mages can be tough matchups. So it's not impossible that his matchups in general will be a little bit better in the top lane. As well, his jungle clear ability is incredible. It's honestly fantastic because of the way the Voidlings work, and you can actually solo Dragon as early as level 3 or 4 into the game. Don't get me wrong though, his AP build still has a lot of merit to it, and Rylai's is probably one of the best items in the entire game on him since it gives his Voidlings a slow. So what's probably going to happen is we might see like some hilarious hybrid build become the best option with like a Rylai's, a Hextech Gunblade Death's Dance, and then a Steric's Gauge or something. He definitely has a lot of options with his build path, and the utility of AP items is typically a little bit better than that of the attack damage items, so there is a lot of room for experimentation, and although he definitely will deal more damage when building AD, that's not always what you want from a champion on your team. Regardless of his build though, AP or AD, he's going to get a little bit tanky and be able to play like kind of a bruiser almost. Although we might struggle a bit versus poke mages because of his ultimate and because he builds some tank stats, he's actually a great counterpick versus assassins. So although we might seem to have some bad matchups in the mid lane, he definitely has a lot of good ones too for sure. And he's definitely tanky enough to be able to succeed as a jungler. I mean, he gets to be a little bit more tanky than like a Nidalee, right? So honestly, jungle AD Malzahar might actually be the most ideal way to play him due to his wave clear, especially at level 1, it's just so good. You can clear every single jungle camp and then do dragon by yourself and you'll still have more than half health at the end of it, and you should be at full health if you aren't even doing dragon. He literally just never takes damage in the jungle, unless you're using his Voidlings incorrectly. And this new playstyle of using his Voidlings as a core aspect isn't bad, and it definitely has potential, but a lot of the time it can be a bit tricky to set up properly, or just kind of weird to play around with the Voidlings, since their mechanics are a little bit clunky. For example, if you're chasing an opponent and then they walk into a bush that you don't have vision of, instead of continuing forward like you normally would and that you're headed in, the Voidlings are going to return back to you until you get vision of that target. It's just a bunch of little things that can make them kind of annoying to work with sometimes, and if your Malefic Vision is on cooldown, The voidling targeting is just all over the place most of the time, and the voidlings usually won't be able to get in range to hit your target anyways. Overall though, this new Malzahar is very unique, and his attack damage playstyle is pretty cool, and although he plays a lot differently now, he still has a lot of awesome strengths for sure. If you were a Malzahar main before, I'm not entirely confident that you'll enjoy the new Malzahar, but he's still pretty cool, so I would be optimistic. And if you haven't played Malzahar before, maybe give him a try when the rework hits the live servers, which should be in about 2 weeks or so from the day I publish this video. And it looks like that's going to be it. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, and if you didn't, hit that dislike. Thanks for watching, subscribe if you want, and I'll see you guys next time.